Ever had one of those moments, like where you just knew something miraculous had happened? Or maybe something so out there, so unexplainable, that it made you question everything?
You're talking about those moments that stick with you, right? The ones that make you wonder if there's more to this world than meets the eye.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. We're tackling a talk all about miracles, angels, and that power of belief. It was given at the April 2024 General Conference.
Intriguing stuff for sure, and a topic that's fascinated people for centuries, regardless of their background.
It really is. Now, the talk doesn't shy away from bold claims. It dives right into this idea that miracles are still happening, that angels are real and present, and it ties all of this to what's called the restoration of priesthood keys.
Now, I know for some people, hearing priesthood keys might conjure images of like some ancient artifact with mystical
I'll
powers.
admit that was my first thought.
Right, it's a vivid image. But in this context, priesthood keys refer to a restoration of authority and a direct connection to the divine, a way to access that power to bless and guide.
So, lists Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark of the Covenant, and more like a spiritual phone line.
That's a great way to put it. And to illustrate this concept, the speaker shares a really intense personal experience. He talks about being thrown in jail in Chile while serving as a missionary. And he describes this overwhelming sense of fear, especially because at the time, people were disappearing. It was a very real threat.
I can't even imagine that feeling of desperation. Being in a foreign country, facing that kind of danger, and clinging to your faith.
It's a powerful setup. And as he's praying for help, he specifically remembers being taught that God watches over his missionaries. And that's when he says a passage from his patriarchal blessing just pops into his mind.
Okay, now for those of us who might not be familiar, what exactly is a patriarchal blessing?
Sure. So in this tradition, a patriarchal blessing is a very personal, almost like a customized blessing. It's given to offer guidance, comfort, and often glimpses into an individual's potential and their future. Usually it's received when a person is young and they carry it with them throughout their life.
Wow, so it's almost like this guiding document from his past suddenly comes to the forefront in this moment of extreme need.
Precisely. And it speaks to how our minds seek comfort and connection during times of crisis. When we feel alone, afraid, or uncertain, we often grasp for something larger than ourselves.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah, whether it's a blessing, a cherished object, a song, even a specific memory, these things become anchors to hope in those turbulent moments. They remind us that we're not alone.
And in his case, this blessing from his past becomes really important as his story unfolds. Because it's not just about finding comfort. It's about a promise that seems, well, impossible.
Impossible is definitely the word that comes to mind, because this part of the talk, it centers around this idea that his patriarchal blessing, it actually promised him the power to raise the dead.
Okay, now you're just messing with me, right?
No, I'm serious. And you can practically hear people in the audience thinking, hold on, is this really going there?
I bet. I mean, it's not exactly your everyday promise.
Not at all. So the speaker then shares the story about how years later, his grandfather gets word that his own mother, the speaker's great-grandmother, had passed away. He rushes home, and sure enough, it's true. She's gone.
It's like the story is setting up a direct test of that promise.
Yeah.
Put up or shut up time.
Right. And the way the grandfather responds is really crucial here. He doesn't, like, demand anything of God. He doesn't say, you promised me this. Instead, he pleads with incredible humility, if it be thy will.
That's a powerful distinction.
It is, because it suggests deep faith, but also this acknowledgement of a power beyond human control. He's not trying to dictate the terms.
So what happens? Does he try to raise her from the dead?
He does. He lays his hands on his deceased mother, he prays, and get this, she comes back to life.
You're kidding.
I'm not. She even claims that she was called back from the spirit world.
Yeah, that's a moment that would make even the most devout believer, like, scratch their head a little.
For sure. And it makes you wonder, right, about that line between life and death. What if there's more to it than we can currently grasp?
It's almost too much for our minds to handle, like trying to comprehend infinity.
And that's just his grandfather's story. Now, the speaker goes on to share his own experience, and it's just as intense. He's driving with his family, and they're involved in a really bad car accident. We're talking high speed, the car rolling multiple times.
Oh, man. It's every parent's worst nightmare.
Absolutely. And as he's recounting the experience, he mentions this small detail. Just moments before the impact, his wife suddenly felt this urge to fasten her seatbelt, something she hadn't thought about moments before. It's almost presented as more than just a coincidence.
Like some kind of intuition or premonition, maybe?
It makes you wonder, right? But it
I know.
gets even more intense because they discovered their daughter Emily trapped under the overturned van.
It's unimaginable. Their daughter, trapped, the weight of that van, the panic. Where do you even begin to process something like that?
And yet, in those moments of absolute crisis, it's amazing how human beings can find this incredible strength. The speaker talks about knowing they had to lift that van to get to Emily, and even though there were only a few people there, he describes it feeling almost miraculously light, like something was aiding them in that moment.
He was certain it was angels, right?
Yeah.
Helping them lift this massive weight.
He was. They find Emily, injured but alive. And you can practically feel this wave of relief wash over the audience as he's describing it.
It's like the weight of the world lifts, just for a moment. But then the reality of her injuries, right?
Absolutely. And the speaker describes giving Emily a priesthood blessing, a practice within their faith that's meant to invoke healing, comfort, and a connection to divine power.
A prayer for healing, in the truest sense.
Yeah. And he describes how, as he's giving this blessing, Emily takes this huge, raspy breath. It's a moment of hope, but things are still incredibly uncertain.
She's rushed to the hospital, but even then, the prognosis isn't good, right?
Not initially. A collapsed lung, a severed tendon, potential brain damage. It's a lot to process.
And yet she recovers.
She makes a full recovery. Now, while the speaker attributes this directly to divine intervention, the power of the priesthood blessing, it also highlights the incredible skill of medical professionals and that amazing resilience of the human spirit.
So maybe it's not about choosing sides,
Sure.
faith or science. Maybe it's about acknowledging that sometimes amazing things happen. The unexpected recovery, the inexplicable feeling that everything's going to be okay, even when the odds are stacked against you.
It makes you think about the power of belief, doesn't it? The potential for miracles, however we define them, to manifest in our lives. And maybe, just maybe, those miracles are closer than we realize.
It's a powerful thought to end on. This deep dive has been an incredible journey, exploring the nature of belief, the mystery of the unexplained, and the possibility that resides within each of us. And for you listening, what stories, what experiences in your own life have defied explanation? Where have you witnessed the seemingly impossible? Keep that question with you today. This has been The Deep Dive, and as always, keep exploring.